Okay, I'll go to the final tool before we kind of run out. So this is the reference set and translation tool. And I think this may well be an interesting tool for you to use, and you can use this today. And it allows you to create reference sets. So these are these essentially subsets of content that you can then also translate. And we built this in a single tool, mainly because what we found was, people come to us and often the question has been, so we need to translate SNOMED, where do we start? And the response is not you start at A and finish at Z. That's really not the right response. So it's understanding how you're going to, where are you using SNOMED first? Are there particular domains that you need to translate? Could that be allergies? Could it be pediatrics? Could it be cardiology? And you would create a reference set of those concepts that are relevant to you, and you can translate those concepts. So we have this tool that we built. It's used by quite a lot of people, some members, some organizations. When you go to this URL, even without an account, you can kind of see there's a lot of reference sets that people have created and use and play with. Here you can see, here's the ambulance clinical impressions subset from New Zealand that's got a lot of concepts in here that these are the reference set members, we call them. And this is what they use as their reference set. Obviously, New Zealand aren't translating, but if I want to know what is abnormal breathing, very similar to the content and the detail I was showing in the browser, looks a bit different, but you can see descriptions, attributes, children and parents, similar type of thing. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to run through creating a reference set and doing a translation. So I have a demo project that's got nothing in it, and I'm going to create a very simple reference set on, I keep on using asthma, mainly because I know I can say it, and it's easy as asthma ref set. I'm using SNOMED CT. I'm not going to use a extension. I could use one of the extensions that are available, but I don't want to do that. And I'm going to choose the February release, and I just tested that's okay. It's all good. You may have heard about namespaces, probably been talked to you about, you need a country namespace when you start to create your own content. And that's something you can apply through, there's an application route to get that. I'm using this one, which is the demo namespace. And the module ID, this is the module for the SNOMED CT core, and I'm just using that one. And then there's some other information. We used to ask for the types of reference sets. So you have extensional, intentional, and external. Extensional is essentially, I'm picking things I want to put in there. Intentional is a subset that's defined by one of those queries that I showed earlier. And external is just a URL to reference set somewhere else. So I'm going to show you an extensional reference set. So we're going to create this reference set. Here we go. This whole tool works around assigning to people. So this is now available to be assigned. And I'm going to assign this to myself. And down here, you can see I now have 2 assigned. And I'm going to now go into my asthma reference set where I can see here's the information that I provided previously. But I have no members yet. So I need to add some members. Now, one way to do that is to very simply upload an existing RF2 file for reference sets. So if you had some somewhere else, you could import those, and that's one way to do it. But it only takes RF2. It doesn't take Excel, for example, or other. I could also add a list of things. So I could say, instead of having to do Excel, I could just take one column in Excel, which has lots of concept IDs, and just paste them in here. And those will then add them all to the reference set. Alternatively, I can say I want to add, I want to go and search for a concept. So I'll go and search for asthma. And here we can see, here is the asthma. I'm going to add asthma. Very simple. And it's in there. But then I could also say, well, actually, maybe I'm going to add a bit more than asthma. And let's see, what about family history? Let's have a look. Or allergic asthma. I'd say, actually, I'm going to add all the children of asthma. So here we can see mild asthma. And in fact, I want to add all of these because they all look interesting. So I can click on this and I can add, add all this. So I can say, I'm going to take all the members, so all the descendants, this is what this sign means, of the sort of respiratory system. So I'll just add those as well. And that means it will add a lot more than just the asthma. So you can use going around the hierarchy to kind of simple. So you can see here, I've now got 3,653 members in my reference set. what it does is now it's going ahead here. You can see it's now refreshing, which means it's getting all the descriptions for those terms. So they'll come up eventually. But this is a good example where I very quickly created a reference set of asthma and other respiratory disorders by just those 2 clicks. So it's a quick way of getting around and doing things quickly. And this would give me 3,653 members to now translate, which is a good starting point. So I just wait for this refresh to finish, which is done. There we go. So now you can see in my reference set members, I have lots of stuff around asthma, but also other respiratory disorders. And this would be my starting point for translation. So a very quick way to create these, subset of concepts. So now I want to translate these. So again, that bit's done. I mean, obviously you could do a lot more. You could take things out. I could say, I don't want rhinitis of pregnancy, for example, so I can just remove that. So you can go through the list and do exactly as you'd kind of expect. But I'm going to translate this now. So I go into a translation, and this is where I create a new translation. I get to choose the reference set I want to translate. So the one I just created was this asthma reference set. So I'm going to translate that. I'm just going to call this, let's call it test translation. The right way if you want it. And then I can choose the language. The drop down gives the languages that are in the system, but I can also type ahead. So I'm going to type, type TH for Thai, module ID, keep it the same, and just add this. So now I'm looking to do, Thai translation, and this is where you can, I'm not even going to, well, you can tell me if I'm wrong. So the way it works very much is, again, assigning things to authors. So you can assign one by one. I can click on here and say, I'm going to assign batch of 10. I'm the only person in this project, so I'm going to assign myself 10 concepts to work on. And here you can see now I've got 10 assigned concepts to work on. So I'm going to start asthma because that's the simple one. And if I go in here, one, it gives you all the information about the concept that's already there, the descriptions, the parents, the children, so on. But this is where I add the description. But one thing we've added in here, it's not perfect. It's Google Translate, but it allows me to not have to necessarily type everything. It can be correct. I don't know. I'm assuming this is probably okay. And you can correct me if I'm wrong or not. So I can add this directly, which means I don't need to keep on typing things. I can go through further. One thing to remember when you're translating is we're not translating the descriptions. We're translating that clinical concept into Thai. And what does that mean? How would you describe all of this information? A concept that is a disorder of respiratory system and has a finding site of airway structure and is asthmatic. How do you describe that? So it could be more than one description. You could add another one, which would be a synonym, and you would choose, this could be something else, and I'll just, something else. And you've chosen the preferred term, which is the one that you would expect most people to use, and synonym would be something else. So I would save this one and go to the next concept. And here you can see this is bilateral Kaposi sarcoma of lungs. I have no idea if that's correct, but I'll put that in. And you can keep on going through all these translations, save and next, and I keep on going, and I've got to the end of the list. But here you can now see these are the ones I translated. So in the asthma where I added the Thai translation, and I also added something else. Those are now there available. I can go and check. Yeah, I'm happy with that one. And I close that up. And when I'm done, I would basically click on the little check mark, and that will essentially put it into a review status. So the author's complete. If I go in here now and look as a reviewer, then the reviewer now has two things. It follows a workflow of an author, and then it gets reviewed. And similarly, I would say assign these to the reviewer, preferably somebody else. And I can either say, yes, it's correct. I can make some changes, or I can say, yes, it's finished and closed. So when I say it's finished, that means it's ready to be ready for publication. So I could just send this to publication and it will go into this list here. So that's been translated and ready to go. Obviously, that's not the case. So I'll remove that back and put that back into authoring again. So that's a very quick run through how one way to do translations. There are other ways, obviously, but this is the tool that we provide at the moment. We do have another tool called WebLate that we're working on. It's a little bit more of a translation tool than necessarily a SNOMED tool, but that's not yet really available. So I kind of open it up. There's quite a lot to talk about very quickly, but any questions or any observations you want to ask?